I always believed humiliation made a sound. I imagined it like a slap or a door slammed shut. Loud, final, obvious. Instead, it arrived in absolute silence. A single email, no greeting, no signature, no trace of human presence behind the words, just a message so clean and bloodless it could have been generated by a machine. I received it while holding a silk dress against my body in front of the mirror. It was emerald green, the kind of green that only expensive fabric can achieve. Deep. Glossy, proud. I had bought it 2 weeks earlier specifically for Aiden's engagement party. I had not worn something so bold in years. I wanted to look unforgettable, not because I craved attention, but because I felt like someone who finally had the right to be seen. I had spent the morning preparing calmly. Hair done, nails polished, a light perfume on my wrists. I moved with the slow anticipation of someone about to relive joy she had only watched from afar in recent years. I was ready. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw the notification. Update regarding guest list. I assumed it was a simple logistical change. Perhaps I would be seated at a different table. Perhaps they wanted to confirm arrival times. I opened it without hesitation. The moment my eyes reached the first line, something inside me went still. Per the request of the hosts, we have revised the attendance. Unfortunately, your presence is no longer required for the event. We appreciate your understanding. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no mention of my name. They did not even say Mrs. Hunt. They did not even say Amya. I was erased with professional courtesy. I stared at the message for a full minute. My reflection stood motionless behind the screen. My posture did not change. My breath remained steady, but I felt as if the floor had quietly dropped beneath me and I was standing in midair pretending gravity still applied. I read it again, and again. I scrolled up to make sure it was indeed sent to me. Then I checked the previous emails. A month ago, Victoria had written with such warmth, "We would be honored if you could attend. It would mean everything to Aiden." The contrast between the two messages was almost obscene. I waited for a feeling. Anger, sorrow, shame, something, but nothing arrived. Only a cold clarity, like frost spreading across glass. Slowly, I lowered the phone onto the vanity table. I smoothed down my dress and sat on the edge of the bed. My room was bathed in afternoon light, soft and golden. It felt cruel for such a beautiful day to hold such ugliness. Across from me hung a framed photograph. Christmas 6 years ago, Logan standing beside Victoria, his arm around her waist. Aiden in front holding a mug of hot chocolate with whipped cream overflowing. I sat slightly apart on the couch armrest, one hand resting on his shoulder. We were laughing, or pretending to. It was one of those pictures where the happiness was more posed than felt. I realized in that moment how little I was missed in that photograph. Even then, I was already fading, still no tears. I stood and gently removed the dress. I laid it flat on the bed and covered it with its plastic shield. Then I walked to the closet and placed it back inside. Everything was done without haste. My silence was not resignation. It was calculation. There are two kinds of women in this world. Those who react and those who prepare. I used to be the first. Decades ago, I would have called Logan and demanded answers. I would have shouted, accused, begged. I would have made a scene, and they would have called me hysterical, irrational, difficult. I no longer give people that satisfaction. Instead, I returned to the vanity and picked up my phone. I opened my email folders. I created a new one. I labeled it Archive. Then I began saving every single message exchanged between me, Victoria, and Logan over the past year. I downloaded the attachments, screenshotted the text conversations, stored voicemail backups, organized by date, all neatly aligned. Not because I knew exactly what I would do, only because I knew this would not be the end of it. They had made a move. I would not answer immediately. I would study the board first. People assume age brings fragility. They mistake stillness for weakness. They do not realize how dangerous a quiet woman can be. I leaned back in my chair and let my hands rest in my lap. Outside, a neighbor was mowing their lawn. The steady drone was almost comforting. Ordinary life continued as if my place in it had not just shifted without warning. For a moment, I considered the possibility that this had been a mistake. Perhaps someone else had interfered. Perhaps the planner had sent the wrong message. But deep down, I knew that was not true. This was deliberate. Precise, calculated. And if they thought I would simply disappear because they wished it, so they had gravely misunderstood the woman they were dealing with, I remained seated for exactly 10 minutes. Not because I needed that long, but because discipline is a habit. You do not act the moment you are struck. You wait until the sting fades, until the impulse to retaliate subsides. Then you choose the response that cuts cleanest. When I finally stood, I walked to my safe and opened it. Inside were binders. Thick. Labeled financial history, trust accounts, corporate records. I ran my fingers across the spines like a pianist warming up before a performance. If they wished to exclude me from their celebration, then I would exclude them from my legacy. But not yet. No, the most important lesson life has taught me is this: revenge is never loud. It is meticulous. It is patient. It is silent until it is irreversible, and I am very good at being silent. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was restless. Restlessness implies movement, anxiety. I was not anxious. I was awake in the same way a security system stays awake. Alert, monitoring, quiet. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while memories of Aiden drifted through my mind. He was 6 when he first asked me if magic was real. We were in my kitchen. He was sitting on the counter swinging his legs while I rolled dough for cinnamon rolls. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes wide with serious concern. "Grandma, do you think dragons exist?" I told him yes, but they do not breathe fire, they breathe truth. That is why people fear them. He had laughed, one of those loud, pure sounds that only children are allowed to make without embarrassment. Then he hugged me from the side, pressing flour into my sweater. "I hope I grow up to be a dragon." I smiled in the darkness, remembering that. Somewhere along the years, the boy who wanted to breathe truth had been taught to breathe silence instead. I wondered if he even knew I was excluded, or if they had convinced him I had declined on my own. I could not blame him if he believed them. Children trust proximity. Whoever is closest is assumed to be honest. I had been drifting further for years without noticing. They had slowly moved me to the perimeter until I was outside the circle entirely, but not forgotten. No, they had not forgotten me. You do not remove someone from a guest list by accident. They had remembered me specifically to remove me. That took intention. The clock on my bedside table showed 3:18 in the morning when I finally rose. I put on a robe and walked to my study. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I turned on only the desk lamp. Pools of light, darkness everywhere else. It felt fitting. I unlocked my computer and opened the archive folder I had created earlier. Dozens of messages, some saccharine, some dismissive, some passive-aggressive coded in politeness. I scrolled slowly, absorbing the tone patterns, the rhythm of their tolerance. It felt like reading the minutes of a meeting where my relevance was periodically debated. There was one message from Victoria that caught my eye, sent 2 months ago, just making sure you understand that the venue has limited space. "We will try to accommodate you, but no promises. I am sure you understand." I had answered politely. Of course, never wishing to be a burden. That was the role I had been assigned. Cooperative, unthreatening, grateful for scraps of inclusion. I clicked on the message and zoomed in on the punctuation. Victoria always added extra spaces before periods when she was irritated, an inconsistency in typing she had never corrected. She had added 2 that day. She had already been planning it then. She must have assumed I would react emotionally. She would probably tell people later that she had tried to include me, but I had made a scene. That I had embarrassed myself, that it had been necessary to protect the event. I will not give her that story. I opened another tab, logged into my trust management portal. My name appeared at the top of the screen. Amya Louise Hunt, primary benefactor, full authority access. Beneath it were line items, investment accounts, property titles, corporate shares, all neatly categorized. Decades of discipline and strategy sitting quietly in numbers. People think wealth is defined by luxury, by the number of shoes in a closet or the size of a diamond. They are wrong. Wealth is defined by control. The ability to make decisions that others must respond to, that is true power. And I was done donating my power to those who did not respect it. I did not make any changes yet. I simply reviewed, verified, confirmed which accounts flowed where, which documents needed signatures, which decisions could be executed immediately and which required legal oversight. Knowledge before action. As the sun began to rise, I made tea, strong, unsweetened. The bitterness suited my mood. I carried it to the kitchen window and watched the light creep along the fence outside. The neighbor across the street was walking his dog, unaware that I was preparing a war. A subtle war, a silent one, but war nonetheless. I thought again of Aiden, of the flower on my sweater, of his laugh. I did not want him to suffer. My intention was not to devastate him, only to free him. Freedom sometimes requires fracture. You break the pattern so something else can grow. If he came to me willingly, I would explain everything. Give him a choice. If he did not, then he would learn the consequences of trusting the wrong people. I rinsed the cup, placed it gently in the rack. I stood there for a long time, hand on the counter, steady as marble. Then I whispered out loud, though no one could hear me, "They removed me from their list. Now I will remove them from mine." It was not a threat. It was a confirmation, a statement of intent. There are moments in one's life when identity crystallizes, when you remember precisely who you are, not who they decided you should be. I am not the woman who waits for permission to exist in her own family. I am not temporary, and I refuse to be silent any longer. The sound of lies, I decided to start with sound, not memory, not speculation. Sound. People can hide in words. They can rewrite history in text. They can disguise cruelty as courtesy, but voices betray intention. Tone cannot lie the way sentences do. I sat in my study the next evening with my headphones on. The sun had barely set. The house smelled of sandalwood from the candle I had lit earlier. Calm, focused, a setting that encouraged clarity. One by one, I began playing the voicemails I had saved from Victoria over the past year. "Hi, Amya, just checking in. We would love to see you soon. Maybe next month. Things are just a little hectic right now." Her voice always carried that smooth politeness, perfectly measured, balanced between friendly and formal. A tone designed to imply warmth while maintaining distance. She had the voice of someone skilled at navigating social spaces without truly showing up in any of them. I listened carefully. The cadence, the pauses. Then I opened another file, one from only 2 weeks ago. "Amya, I hope you understand that we want this event to be peaceful. And we know you can sometimes feel strongly about things, so maybe it is best if you sit this one out. For everyone's sake, we still love you." She said we, not I. She was implying consensus. She was wrapping her decision in the illusion of unity, making it sound like a compassionate act, like exclusion was an act of mercy. I replayed that part again, slowed it down, "for everyone's sake." I felt my jaw tighten, not in anger, but in recognition. I had heard that tone before. From doctors who told me to calm down when I was in labor. From bankers who explained interest rates slowly as if I were a child. From authority figures who insulted under the guise of concern, the tone of benevolent dismissal. I opened another folder. This one contained recordings of our in-person conversations. I had a habit of using my phone to record meetings for reference. It was something I started accidentally years ago during a business negotiation. I found it useful and the habit stuck. Not for spying, for accuracy. I clicked on one from last year. It was at a brunch at their home. I could hear clinking cutlery faintly in the background. Victoria laughed lightly. "We really appreciate everything you have done for us. Truly. But you have to understand that times are changing. Younger generations handle things differently. Sometimes your directness can be misunderstood." There it was, the careful framing, not accusing, reframing. She was not saying I was wrong. She was saying I was outdated. I closed my eyes and sat back in my chair. People always talk about betrayal as something sharp, sudden, a knife between the ribs. I disagree. Betrayal is not always violent. Sometimes it is gentle, graceful, coated in compliments. Sometimes they smile while removing you from relevance, and they call it progress. I opened my eyes and clicked on another file. This time, one of the newer voicemails from Logan. "Mom, I know you might be disappointed, but please don't make things harder than they need to be." The phrasing was interesting. "Please don't make things harder." It implied that the situation already existed and that my reaction determined whether it became worse. He was preemptively shifting responsibility to me. He was preparing to blame me for whatever would follow. I repeated the lines slowly under my breath. "Please don't make things harder." The words settled in my chest like stones. Heavy. Familiar. I had spent decades being told not to make things harder. At work, at home, in friendships. Womanhood for me had often been a balancing act between truth and tolerance. Say enough to stand your ground, but not so much that others accuse you of shaking theirs. I removed the headphones and set them down. The room was quiet. Then I noticed something. All the files from Victoria had the same digital signature. The same metadata ID. That was expected. She likely used the same phone for all recordings, but one voicemail stood out. It appeared to be from her. The voice matched, but the metadata did not. The compression pattern was different. The timestamp did not align with the call log saved in my phone history. I narrowed my eyes. This was not sent directly from her phone. It had been modified. My pulse did not quicken. My breathing did not change. Only my perception sharpened. Someone had altered at least one message, possibly more. Someone had taken the time to control not just what was said, but how it was preserved. That meant intention, planning, strategy. They were not merely excluding me. They were constructing a narrative of instability, one where I would appear unreasonable if I protested, one where any resistance would be labeled as hysteria. A classic maneuver. If you wish to silence someone, first question their credibility. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. I opened a new document. I titled it Reconstruction. Then I began listing discrepancies, file origin mismatches, message inconsistencies, pattern deviations, not emotional complaints. Evidence. There is something powerful about looking at harm through the lens of data. It strips away sentimentality. Anger becomes information. Pain becomes analysis. I was no longer the wounded grandmother. I was an investigator, and I intended to solve this case. I sat there for a long moment, hands resting lightly on the edge of my desk, the weight of everything I had just heard pressing against my mind like fog against a window. There is a certain kind of betrayal that does not stab. It seeps. It seeps through tone, through phrasing, through the tiny pauses that reveal more than the words themselves ever could. Most people listen for content. I listen for intention. I replayed Victoria's message again, this time not as a grandmother, but as a strategist. She said she only wanted peace, that stepping back would be kinder for everyone, and that she hoped I understood. It would have sounded considerate to someone naive. But there was a sharpness inside her softness, like lace wrapped around wire. Peace was not her goal. Control was. I leaned closer to the screen, examining the metadata attached to the file. The timestamp claimed it was recorded at 6:47 in the evening 2 Fridays ago. I checked my call log. There was no incoming call from her that night. Someone had stitched her voice into a fabricated message and then sent it through a different device, likely hoping I would accept it without question. They had counted on me to hear rather than to listen. I have made many mistakes in my life, but one thing I never do is accept anything at surface value. Not contracts, not apologies, not affection, especially not from people who use kindness like currency. I opened the audio analysis software I had installed earlier. A simple interface. Upload file, detect anomalies. I dragged the voicemail into the tool and watched the waveform flatten and expand as the system processed it. Within seconds, the results appeared. Inconsistent background frequency detected, irregular modulation. Possible splice at timestamp 13.4 seconds. Even technology could see through her. I whispered to myself, not with anger but with quiet satisfaction, you edited this. You broke it. That means I can break you. My reflection in the darkened monitor looked calmer than I felt, not furious. Focused. Fury is a luxury. Strategy is survival. I clicked through more messages, hunting for patterns. Victoria's tone had always been consistent in person, slightly clipped at the edges, as if speaking to someone below her threshold of patience. Yet in these recordings, there was no flicker of frustration, no slight inhale before delivering a well-masked insult. Every sentence was perfectly balanced, too polished, too symmetrical. Human speech is never perfectly measured. Only manufactured speech is. I switched my attention to Logan. His messages were shorter, vaguer. Mom, let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. There was no affection in it, only management. The sentence of someone trying to prevent inconvenience rather than pain. I wondered if he had even considered what this would do to me, or if he had simply assumed I would adapt like I always had. Mothers are expected to absorb hurt like sponges and still remain soft when squeezed. Not this time. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. I thought of the years I had spent training myself to respond gracefully to disrespect. The smiles, the nods, the I understand even when I absolutely did not. Somewhere along the way I had confused patience with passivity. They had mistaken restraint for surrender. That misconception was my fault. I had allowed them to believe I was tame, a mistake I was now prepared to rectify. I stood and walked to the window. The glass was cool beneath my fingertips. Outside, the street lamps cast long golden streaks across the pavement. Everything looked calm. Still, ordinary. Most wars begin exactly like this. Not with sirens, with silence. I could not confront them yet, not without forcing their defense reflex. People become vicious when cornered. Better to let them remain comfortable. Better to let them believe I was wounded and retreating. Only then would they lower their guard. Behind me, the screen still glowed with evidence. Proof that their cruelty was not careless but curated. They had not made a mistake. They had made a choice. Choices have consequences. I returned to my chair and opened a blank document. At the top I typed, narrative reconstruction. Beneath it I listed every piece of manipulated evidence I could identify, the altered timestamps, the compression changes, the missing call log entries, not as accusations, as facts. Emotion can be dismissed. Data cannot. A strange calm filled me as I typed, not the calm of acceptance, the calm before execution. Every keystroke felt like placing a tile in a mosaic. I was assembling a portrait of their betrayal that they would not be able to deny. Once the list was complete, I saved it and backed it up twice. One copy on a drive hidden inside a hollowed book on my shelf. Another on a cloud account registered under an alias I had created years ago for an entirely different reason. One thing life taught me early is this: always have exits, always have witnesses. I pushed my chair back and stood. My legs tingled from sitting too long. I stretched, rolling my shoulders slowly, feeling the tension shift but not disappear. It would not disappear until action was taken. Walking toward the kitchen, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My hair was slightly disheveled. My eyes darker than usual. I did not look broken. I looked awake. I said quietly to myself, not as affirmation but as declaration, I am no longer observing. I am moving. I poured myself a glass of water and drank it slowly. Then I opened the drawer where I kept my old phone. A separate number, rarely used. Not connected to any shared contacts. It was a line only a few trusted people knew existed. One of those people was my attorney. I did not call her yet, but I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment. Soon, not yet. Patience is not passivity, it is precision. I placed the phone back, closed the drawer, and turned off the lights. The house went dark, but I did not. Morning arrived without ceremony. No thunder, no revelation, just light. Pale, indifferent light seeping through the curtains like a silent spectator waiting to see what I would do next. I lay still for several minutes, aware of the ceiling above me, the softness of the sheets beneath me, the familiar rhythm of my breathing. Everything looked the same, yet nothing was the same anymore. Something inside me had shifted during the night. Not broken, aligned. I rose, showered, dressed in charcoal trousers and a white blouse. No jewelry, no perfume. The attire of someone going to war without announcing it. There is power in understatement. Let them believe you are calm while you unscrew the foundations beneath them. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee while reviewing the plan forming in my head. Information first, then action. Never the other way around. I needed to know the full extent of what had been done to erase me, not just one voicemail or one fraudulent message. I needed to know how long they had been preparing to push me out and how many channels they had used to orchestrate it. I started with social media. The thing I rarely used but always monitored. I opened the engagement announcement post on Victoria's account. Hundreds of congratulations, elegant photos of her and Aiden smiling under soft lights. I scrolled slowly. No mention of me, no tag. I checked the caption. Surrounded by love from everyone who matters most. A clever phrase. Vague enough to be innocent, sharp enough to cut if aimed at the right target. I clicked on the comments and searched for my name. Nothing. People asking, will your grandmother be there? Those comments had been deleted. Only the adoring ones remained. You two are perfect. You deserve everything. Wishing you a peaceful and beautiful celebration. Peaceful, that word again. It followed me like a warning label. I moved to Aiden's account. His post was less polished but similar. Casual laughter. A short caption. Forever starts now. No photos of us together. Not one. He had once uploaded a picture of us baking cookies when he was 13. It was gone, archived or deleted. Vanished as cleanly as the email had removed me. I stared at his face on the screen. He looked happy, or at least he looked like someone trying to appear happy for the camera. I wondered if he had felt any hesitation before approving the erasure. Or if he had been gently guided into compliance with words like it's for the best and she won't mind. I closed the browser and walked to my office. The room felt different today, less like a sanctuary, more like a command center. I opened my financial records again, reviewing the trust structure I had built over decades. 5 accounts feeding into 3 holding companies, 2 properties under legal shield, 1 emergency reserve set aside for contingencies I had hoped would never arrive. Contingencies had arrived. My fingers hovered over the cursor above the line labeled primary beneficiaries, Logan Hunt and spouse. I did not remove their names, not yet. I simply stared at them, letting the reality sink in that these were the people who believed they could discard me while still expecting future reward. They assumed inheritance was tradition, automatic, unconditional. They had forgotten the simplest truth. Nothing is guaranteed when the signature required is still attached to a beating heart. I exhaled slowly and closed the tab. Not today. Today was not execution. Today was reconnaissance. I picked up my phone and considered who I could speak to without alerting them. There were few. Most acquaintances were mutual. One wrong conversation and the whispers would begin. She is overreacting. She is being dramatic. She is making trouble again. I needed someone outside the circle. Someone who knew me but owed them nothing. Then I remembered Margaret, not a friend. Friends are often liabilities disguised as comforts. Margaret had been my attorney for 12 years. Sharp, unsentimental, efficient. She admired logic more than loyalty, which made her perfect. Loyalty can be manipulated. Logic cannot. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Good morning, Amya." Her tone was neither warm nor cold. It was balanced, professional. The voice of someone ready to evaluate rather than react. I said evenly, "I need a consultation." Quietly, there was a pause on the other end, then a single word, "Understood." No questions, no assumptions. That was why I trusted her. We scheduled to meet the next day, a discreet location. No office, no witnesses, just two women and the truth laid bare like instruments on a surgical tray. After ending the call, I stood by the window again. The same view as yesterday, the same street. Same trees, yet everything felt newly defined. There is a moment in every war where surveillance ends and strategy begins. I was standing in that moment. I whispered to the glass they wanted peace. I will give them silence first, then consequence. I pressed my palm against the cool surface as if sealing an unspoken vow. Then I turned away and prepared. I spent the rest of the morning in motion, not hurried but deliberate, moving through the house with a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. It is remarkable how clarity can change the weight of a body. Yesterday I had felt heavy. Today I felt aligned. Every breath had direction. I opened the cabinet in the hallway where I kept old folders, the kind made of thick leather that no one uses anymore. Inside were documents from years I rarely revisited: birth certificates, medical forms, insurance records, a file labeled guardianship agreement, temporary custody of minor, Aiden Hunt. I had nearly forgotten about that one. It was from when Aiden was 9 and Logan and Victoria had gone on an extended trip overseas. They had needed someone legally authorized to care for him in their absence. They chose me. At the time it felt like trust. Now it felt like evidence. I traced my fingers along the page, remembering those weeks clearly. Aiden had stayed with me for 42 days. He counted each one, insisting on marking them on the kitchen calendar with a blue marker. Every morning he would ask, "Do I go home today?" Not because he wanted to leave, because he wanted to know how many more days until he would have to. He had once said, "I wish I could stay here forever." I told him forever was a long time. He said, "Then I wish it was longer." I folded the paper gently and slipped it into a new folder, one that I would later take to Margaret, not as emotional leverage, as legal history. They had formally entrusted me with guardianship once. That fact alone would dismantle any future claim that I was unstable or unfit. There is power in memory, but there is greater power in documentation. I moved through the house gathering pieces of the past like threads. Photographs, receipts from vacations I had paid for. Letters from Aiden written in sloppy handwriting that said things like, "You are the best person in the world, and when I am big I will buy you a house bigger than this one." I did not collect them out of sentiment. I collected them because I knew a narrative war was coming, and wars are not won with emotion. They are won with structure. In the afternoon, I sat at my desk and laid everything out in front of me. The pages formed a map, a timeline of devotion. They had not expected me to remember. They had not expected me to organize. They believed erasure would be easy because they believed I was alone. They had forgotten that solitude is not the same as weakness. Loneliness hurts, but isolation sharpens. My phone buzzed, a notification from a group message labeled family important. I had been added without consent. I hesitated before opening it, wondering which version of me they expected to be reading. The emotional one, the apologetic one, the mother who would accept a bone thrown in her direction and be grateful. The message was from Victoria, just checking in to see if you are okay. We know things might have been misinterpreted. We still want you to be part of the family, but maybe at a slower pace. Hope you understand. I stared at the words, marveling at the artistry of manipulation. She had crafted it like a peace offering while sliding blame neatly into my hands. Misinterpreted, meaning you misunderstood. Slower pace, meaning stay away until we decide you are manageable. Hope you understand, meaning if you react badly, you will be the villain. Once upon a time, I might have responded politely. I might have said, "Thank you for considering my feelings. I appreciate the update. Let me know when you are ready." That version of me no longer existed. Instead, I let the message sit unread. I closed the app. Silence is a powerful answer when someone expects submission. Evening arrived quietly. I made myself a simple dinner and ate it at the table alone. not lonely. Focused. I watched the steam rise from the bowl and thought about how many nights I had eaten like this, convincing myself that peace was found in acceptance. I see now that peace without dignity is simply sedation. After dinner, I returned to my study and opened the document titled Narrative Reconstruction. I added a new section. Motives. Beneath it, I wrote, financial consolidation upon marriage, image control, generational authority shift. I knew Victoria well enough to understand her hierarchy of values. She believed in elegance, influence, and perception. Love was secondary. Blood was irrelevant. Optics were everything. I whispered into the dim light, she does not fear losing me. She fears being seen as cruel. That is her weakness. I will not attack her reputation. I will let her destroy it with her own actions. The clock on the wall struck 9. Tomorrow I would meet Margaret. Tomorrow the planning would evolve into execution. Tonight was the last night of stillness. I sat in silence for several minutes, allowing the weight of that transition to settle through me. I was not scared. I was not exhilarated. I was resolved. There is a kind of calm that comes when you finally stop negotiating your own worth. I had reached that point. They could remove me from photographs, from messages, from celebrations, but they could not remove me from reality. Reality does not bend because someone edits a voicemail. I stood, turned off the light, and whispered one final promise into the dark. Respect is not requested. It is required. The next morning arrived without drama, but the world felt slightly off balance, as if gravity had tilted a few degrees and only I could feel it. I dressed with the same precision as the day before, except this time I chose a navy blazer. Structured, measured, a garment that communicated restraint without softness. It was not armor, but it was preparation. The meeting with Margaret had been set for 11. A discreet cafe at the edge of town, the kind where no one lingers too long and conversations dissolve into the clatter of dishes. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table in the corner. My back against the wall, my view clear. I have never liked sitting with my back exposed. It is not paranoia. It is experience. I ordered tea and waited. My hands rested flat on the table, not fidgeting. Still, from the outside, I must have looked serene. Inside, I was calculating how many steps remained before silence turned into action. Not many. Margaret arrived exactly on time. She walked in with her usual efficient stride, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Her hair was pulled back, her glasses glinting in the light. She spotted me immediately and inclined her head slightly, not smiling but acknowledging. She sat, placed the folder between us, and said simply, "Tell me everything." So I did, not with embellishment, not with theatrics. I recounted the disinvitation, the altered voicemail, the fabricated tone, the digital inconsistencies. I laid out the printed documents and photographs I had brought, spreading them carefully across the table like evidence submitted to court. She listened without interruption, her eyes sharp and unreadable. When I finished, she tapped a finger lightly on one of the papers and said, "They are building a narrative of instability." Yes, and you want control of the counter-narrative. Not narrative, reality. She paused. There was the slightest flicker of approval in her expression. You want to make sure that if they say you are irrational, the world will see data instead of noise. Exactly. She leaned back and rested her hands together. You have options, some legal, some strategic. Which are you prepared to pursue? All of them. She nodded once. Then let us begin. We spent the next hour outlining the structure. Step 1, documentation. Every message, every timestamp, every discrepancy. Step 2, legal insulation. Updating my trust so that no one could claim financial vulnerability or diminished awareness on my behalf. Step 3, controlled exposure. Not confrontation. Exposure, not by my mouth, through undeniable evidence. She advised patience. Every move must be premeditated. Every signature timed. Every word calculated. I agreed to all of it. When the discussion ended, she closed her portfolio and said, "One last question. Do you want to destroy them or simply remove them?" I looked at her steadily. I do not need destruction, I need clarity. Whatever they have built on deception must collapse under its own weight. I will not push it. I will only step aside while it falls. She inclined her head in understanding. Then we shook hands, not as friends but as co-conspirators bound by logic. When she left, I remained at the table for a while, staring at the empty cups and scattered papers. My reflection in the window looked different somehow. Sharper, not younger, sharper. On the drive home, my phone buzzed, a message from Logan. "Mom, can we talk?" No punctuation, no warmth, a command disguised as concern. I did not respond. He was reaching out because he felt a disturbance. He could not name it yet, but he sensed something had shifted. Guilt is often mistaken for intuition. At home, I placed the documents neatly into a drawer, feeling the weighted satisfaction of order. War does not begin with a fire. It begins with structure, with files aligned, with facts unassailable. Later that evening, I stepped outside into the garden. The air was cool. The sky tinted lavender. I walked slowly along the path, listening to the sound of my footsteps on gravel. Each step felt like punctuation, not of an ending, of an opening statement. I thought of Aiden then, his face at 6, at 13, at 25, his laugh, his silence. I did not know yet whether he had betrayed me knowingly or whether he had been guided away from me like a hand pushed gently from a shoulder. My judgment of him had not yet been made. That would depend on the next move he chose to make. I stood beneath the old oak tree at the corner of the yard and whispered into the branches, "He has one chance. Only one. If he seeks truth, I will meet him with open hands. If he remains silent, I will meet him with silence in return." The wind moved through the leaves like breath. It sounded almost like agreement. I returned inside, closed the door, and turned the lock slowly, not out of fear, out of finality. Let the tremor reach them. Let them feel something shifting beneath their feet. Let them wonder if I am angry. Let them whisper among themselves about whether they have gone too far. I smiled faintly as I moved through the dim hallway. They have not seen far enough yet. That night, I left my phone face down on the table and went to bed earlier than usual. Not out of fatigue, out of control. When you refuse to respond, you force others to sit with their own uncertainty. I had given them silence. They would now begin to fill it with their own fears. I woke the next morning to 3 missed calls, 2 from Logan. One from a number I recognized as Victoria's mother. Interesting. They were already outsourcing concern. I ignored all of them. There was also a message from Aiden. Short, "Hey, are you okay?" No context, no reference to anything specific. It was the kind of message sent by someone who sensed something but did not yet dare to acknowledge it aloud. I stared at it for a long time before locking the screen again without replying. Not because I wanted to punish him, because I wanted to measure him. Would he follow up, or would he retreat at the first sign of discomfort? People reveal their loyalty not through grand gestures but through persistence. I made breakfast slowly. Poached eggs, toast with butter, tea with no sugar. Routine is the spine of discipline. As I ate, I considered the psychology of disruption. When you remove a predictable response from a familiar system, the system malfunctions. I had always been predictable. I had always replied, appeased, soothing the discomforts of others before tending to my own. Now they were faced with absence. Absence is louder than protest. By noon, another message came, this time from Victoria. "We are worried. Please respond so we know you're safe." The irony almost made me laugh. They had removed me from their celebration claiming it was for peace, yet now they demanded acknowledgement to preserve their own. My silence had become their disturbance. Good. I placed the phone face down again and returned to my desk. I opened the document labeled Timeline. A structured breakdown of interactions over the last 6 months. I added the recent messages, detailing the time, tone, and presumed motive. This was not petty logging. This was data accumulation. If a storm were to come, I wanted the forecast on paper. In the afternoon, I went for a walk. The sky was clear, the air crisp. I passed neighbors who nodded politely. Some greeted me with warm familiarity. None of them knew I was preparing to turn my life into a controlled dismantling. It is fascinating how much revolution can exist beneath an ordinary face. On the way back, I saw a couple arguing quietly at their car. The woman spoke with tight lips, the man answering with exaggerated calm. I recognized the dynamic instantly. One speaking truth, the other managing optics. That is how Victoria operated. Never loud, always composed. She preferred to win by making the other party appear unhinged. It is difficult to accuse a whisperer. People only fear the ones who shout. When I returned home, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Aiden. "I feel like something is wrong. If I did something to upset you, I want to understand." That one I read twice. There was sincerity in his wording, not performance, not obligation, a reflex of conscience, but sincerity does not erase complicity. It only opens a door. Whether I walked through it would depend on his next step. I did not answer. Not yet. At 5 in the evening, there was a knock on my door. I paused mid-step, then turned slowly toward the sound. I was not expecting anyone. I walked calmly to the entrance and looked through the peephole. Logan. He stood there shifting his weight from one foot to the other, glancing toward his car as if deciding whether to stay or flee. His shoulders were tense. His hair slightly unkempt. He looked like a man who wanted to appear composed but had lost the script. I did not open the door. I simply watched him through the glass. He took a breath and said aloud, "Mom, I know you are in there. Can we please talk?" His voice was low. He was speaking carefully. Too carefully, I remained silent. He continued, "I do not know what happened, but I want to fix it." Another calculated line. He said what happened, not what we did. He separated himself from responsibility, an old habit. I stayed still. He sighed heavily and said, "Please, you are scaring everyone." Ah, there it was, not concern for me, concern for comfort. My silence had become threatening only because it disrupted the performance they had prepared. I finally spoke, quietly but clearly enough for him to hear through the door. "If you wanted peace, you should have left me in it." There was a pause. He stepped closer, pressing his hand to the door. "Mom, this is getting out of hand," I answered calmly. "It only feels that way because for once you are not holding the reins." He did not respond immediately. I could hear him inhale sharply. Then in a tighter tone, he said, "This is not the way to handle things." There was a time when that sentence would have deflated me, when I would have believed that my anger, my hurt, was inappropriate simply because someone else decided it made them uncomfortable. Not anymore. I said, "Go home, Logan. Think carefully before you return." He stood there for several seconds, then slowly lowered his hand. When he finally walked away, I did not watch from the window. I did not need to. His footsteps already told me enough. Uneven, conflicted, afraid. I closed the door gently, feeling no triumph, only confirmation. They were beginning to understand. Silence was no longer my weakness. It was my weapon. I woke before sunrise, not because of restlessness, but because anticipation has its own kind of dawn. There was a stillness in the air that felt less like peace and more like the moment before an orchestra begins, every instrument poised in silence. Today would not be the day of confrontation, but it would be the day of invitation. I brewed tea and stood by the window as steam curled into the pale morning light. The house was quiet, but beneath the quiet was momentum. Something had shifted after Logan's visit. He had gone home carrying unease like a stain on his shirt. He would not know how to explain it to Victoria. She would demand reason. He would not have one. That fracture between them would grow, not because I widened it. Because truth does that on its own. I checked my phone. One new message. "Aiden again. I know you are ignoring me. I am not trying to force anything. I just want to understand what is happening. If I did something wrong, tell me. If someone else did, tell me that too." There was sincerity, but also hesitation. He was standing at a doorway he wasn't sure he was allowed to open. In the past, I would have softened. I would have replied, assuring him that everything was fine, that he did nothing wrong, that I loved him no matter what. But that kind of comfort was no longer kindness. It was indulgence. Sometimes love must be withheld to test its weight. I typed a single sentence. "Come see me." Alone. Then I set the phone down without waiting for his response. I did not specify a time. If he truly wanted answers, he would arrive without scheduling. If he hesitated, I would have my answer without asking the question. I spent the next hour arranging the house. Not cleaning, arranging. Intentional spaces shape intentional conversations. I placed the documents on the table in the study, not openly visible but not hidden. If he noticed them, it would mean he was looking. If he did not, it would mean he was avoiding. Around 10, I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. Slow, uncertain. I did not check the window. I waited. A soft knock. Not assertive, not timid, respectful. I opened the door. Aiden stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly slouched. He looked older than I remembered, not in years but in tension. His eyes carried questions he had not yet found permission to ask. He said quietly, "I came." I answered simply, "I see that." We stood there for a moment, examining each other not as grandmother and grandson, but as two people finally acknowledging the gap between them. He took a breath. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without speaking. He walked past me slowly, his gaze drifting around the room as if searching for familiarity or ghosts. When we reached the kitchen, I gestured toward the table. "Sit." He did. I made tea for both of us. The same way I used to when he was younger, except this time I did not add sugar to his cup. He did not complain. He noticed. That was important. He held the cup but did not drink. His fingers tightened around the handle. He finally spoke. "Everyone is freaking out." I raised an eyebrow. "Everyone." He hesitated. Mom, Dad, even her. He would not say her name. That was also important. I nodded slowly. "And you?" He looked down. "I do not know what to think." "Good. Thinking is better than assuming." He swallowed. "Did I do something? Did I let something happen without realizing?" I watched him carefully. He was not defending himself. He was interrogating himself. "Rare. Valuable." I said evenly, "What do you believe happened?" He hesitated again, then said, "They told me you did not want to be at the engagement party, that you thought it would be too much, that you preferred not to come. I kept my voice calm, and you believed that." He closed his eyes for a brief moment. I wanted to. It was easier than thinking someone lied. There it was, honesty, painful and pure. I leaned forward slightly. The truth is not always easy, but it is always available. You only have to choose to see it. He looked at me then, really looked, as if checking my face for cracks, for anger, for disappointment. Instead, he found certainty. His voice was quiet, so they lied. I did not answer with words. Silence was answer enough. He exhaled shakily, then whispered, "I am sorry." I shook my head slowly. "Do not be sorry for what you did not know. Be sorry only if you choose to stay ignorant after knowing." He nodded. His throat moved as he swallowed. He did not cry. He did not make promises. He sat with the weight of realization like someone wearing a new coat that did not yet fit. We stayed that way for a while, not as accuser and defendant, not even as family, as two witnesses to a fracture finally visible in daylight. After several minutes, he asked softly, "What happens now?" I held his gaze. "Now, you decide who you are." Aiden did not look away after I told him that now he had to decide who he was. He sat there gripping the cup between his hands, not drinking, only holding it as if the heat anchored him to the moment. I watched his shoulders rise and fall slowly, the shape of a man trying to steady himself before asking a question that might change the course of his life. He spoke quietly. "Why would they lie to me about you?" I did not rush to answer. Some questions should hover long enough to sting. He waited. His eyes did not move from mine, because lies are easier than accountability. He inhaled as if he had expected that answer yet still needed to hear it aloud. He did not deny it. He did not defend them. He simply nodded once as if accepting the logic while grieving what it meant. I stood from the table and walked toward the study. I did not tell him to follow. I wanted to see if he would. After a breath, he rose without a word and walked behind me, his steps measured, his silence heavy but willing. I stopped beside the desk where the folder lay closed. My fingers rested on it gently. I did not open it yet. I turned to face him. "Before I show you anything, I need one answer." He straightened slightly. His voice was steady. "Ask me. If what you see contradicts what you have been told, will you still choose truth even if it costs you comfort?" He did not respond immediately. His eyes flickered downward for a moment before returning to mine with new resolve. "Yes." Not loud, not eager. Certain. Only then did I open the folder. Inside were printed transcripts of the voicemails I had analyzed. Side by side on each page, the original audio data and the version I received. He leaned closer, frowning as his eyes scanned the numbers. He looked confused at first, then I saw it. The moment the discrepancy clicked, his brows drew inward, his breath caught, and he whispered almost to himself, "This is edited." I watched him closely. His pupils tightened. His jaw clenched, not in anger, in betrayal. Betrayal is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet collapse of certainty. He read through another page, then another. His fingers trembled slightly, though he tried to keep his composure. He pressed one hand to his forehead and closed his eyes. "They made it look like you were unstable." "Yes," he swallowed. "Like you imagined things, like you were causing drama." "Yes, and they told me you were the one pulling away." "Yes." He did not speak for several seconds. When he finally did, his voice was low and unfamiliar. "I feel sick." I nodded slowly. Truth has that effect when it arrives without cushioning. He looked at the papers again, then at me. Why would they go this far? Control, narrative, inheritance. He flinched at the last word. He knew I meant more than money. Inheritance is not only financial. It is legacy, position, influence. He exhaled sharply and stepped back, running both hands through his hair. He paced once across the room, then stopped, turning toward me with a face that looked suddenly much younger, like the boy who used to cling to my arm when he was frightened. "I do not know what to do," I answered him plainly. "You do not need to decide now. You only need to choose whether to keep your eyes open or close them again." He stood still, chest rising and falling slowly. Then he nodded. "They are open." "Good." We stood in silence for a long moment, not the uneasy kind, the sacred kind. The kind that forms when illusion shatters and the air has not yet learned to adjust to the absence. Finally, he asked, "What happens next?" I closed the folder and placed it back on the desk. "Next, you watch." His brows furrowed. "Watch what?" "Watch how people behave when they know the truth is no longer theirs to control." He stared at me, absorbing my words like instructions rather than prophecy. I walked past him toward the hallway. He followed without thinking. At the door he paused, turning back to look at the house as if seeing it differently. Perhaps he was. This was no longer a home, it was now a threshold. When he faced me again, his posture had changed. Not fully transformed, but steadier. He whispered, "I am with you." I did not smile. Affection at this moment would make the promise smaller. I only nodded once. Then I said softly, "If that is true, then do not speak on my behalf. Do not argue with them. Do not defend me. The moment you explain me, you shrink me." He absorbed that like scripture. He whispered one final time, "I understand." Good. He left without asking for a hug, without promising to call, without padding the moment with comfort, respect without performance. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed was different from before. Not lonely. Not empty. Full. A storm does not need thunder to prove its arrival. Sometimes it begins with a single shift in the wind. Today, the wind had changed. I did not reach out to anyone in the 2 days that followed. I did not message. I did not call. I did not ask what was happening on their side. I did not need to. Silence travels faster than speech. It infiltrates the mind and forces speculation to grow in every corner left unanswered. I had released silence into their house. Now I simply waited for the echo. It arrived on the 3rd evening. I was in the garden trimming dead branches from the rose bushes when my phone buzzed with a message from Logan. "We need to talk in person. This cannot go on like this." I read it once, then locked the screen. I continued trimming. When you do not react immediately, people begin negotiating with themselves. 10 minutes later, another message. "I am coming over tonight whether you respond or not." That one made me pause, not surprised, curious. Desperation or command? His tone was not concern. It was escalation. He was losing narrative control. I put away the shears, washed my hands, and made myself tea. I did not wait by the door. I let evening unfold at its own pace. He arrived just after sunset. His knock was harder than Aiden's had been. Less patience, more pressure. I opened the door and stepped aside without a word. He walked in with the stride of a man ready to confront, but already unsure of how. His eyes scanned the room as if expecting visible evidence of wrongdoing. There was none. Clean house, calm air. No chaos to point at. He already looked frustrated. He turned to me. His jaw was set tight. "Why are you doing this to us?" I met his stare without blinking. "Doing what?" He exhaled sharply. "You know exactly what I mean. You are not talking to anyone. You are turning Aiden against us. You are making this bigger than it needs to be." There it was. Accusation cloaked as plea. I spoke softly. "I have not said a single word to anyone about you." His eyes narrowed. "Then why is Aiden acting strange? Why won't he answer our calls? Why does he look at me like I have done something wrong?" I did not smile, but inside I felt the faintest flicker of acknowledgement. The ripple had reached them. "Maybe he is thinking." He scoffed. "He is confused because you are manipulating him." I stayed still. When truth replaces illusion, confusion is the first symptom. His expression darkened. "Stop talking in riddles." I answered plainly. "I am not the one avoiding clarity." His voice rose. "Are you trying to punish us?" "No, if I were punishing you, you would feel it." That made him stop. He blinked once as if realizing he had no idea what my full capacity for punishment might be. Until now, he had only seen the version of me that absorbed damage quietly. He changed tactics. His tone softened in a way that was almost convincing. "Mom, please, this is getting out of hand. We are family. We should be together right now, not in some Cold War." I tilted my head slightly. "Then why did you remove me?" He flinched. "That again? That still?" He ran a hand over his face. "It was Victoria's idea. She thought it would be easier." I nodded slowly. "And you agreed." He hesitated. "I did not think you would care this much." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Not malicious. Honest. Brutally honest. He had truly believed I would accept erasure quietly. I stepped closer, not threatening, only firm. "The problem is not that you believed she was right. The problem is that you believed I did not matter." His lips parted. "No, that is not what it is. Exactly what it is." He swallowed hard. His eyes flickered, searching for a rebuttal. He found none. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not tremble. Calm is the sharpest blade when someone expects fire. He finally said quietly, "What do you want from us?" I took a slow breath. "I want nothing from you. That is what frightens you." He stared at me as if trying to solve a puzzle he had never known existed. For years he believed he knew my shape. Now he realized he had only known the silhouette. In the silence that followed, he asked one more question, one he did not want the answer to. "Are you going to make this public?" A small pause, heavy, precise. I met his eyes. "That depends. Will you continue lying privately?" His throat tightened. I saw it. He looked away. When he looked back, there was fear, not of me, of consequence. He finally spoke, softer than before. "I do not know how to fix this," I answered gently. "That is because you still think this is yours to fix." His eyes rose slowly, meeting mine. This is not damage, this is revelation. What you do with it will decide who you are. He did not respond. He stood in the doorway for several seconds, then turned and left without another word. I closed the door behind him, not with satisfaction, with certainty. They had felt the ripple. Soon, the wave would follow. The next morning unfolded with quiet predictability. I watered the plants. I brewed tea. I opened the windows to let in the chill of early light. But beneath the surface of routine, I could feel the shift like a vibration in the floorboards. Something on their side had begun to unravel. I did not have to witness it directly to know. When people who have built their identity on control begin to lose it, the first thing that falters is tone. At 9:30, Victoria called, not texted, called. I watched the phone vibrate on the table, her name on the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. She called again, and again. I did not pick up. On the fourth attempt, she switched to voicemail. I listened not because I cared what she said, but because inflection was more revealing than language. Her voice came through smooth, rehearsed. Hi, Amya, I have been trying to get in touch. I am concerned about how things have escalated, and I would really like to clear the air. Could you please give me a call back when you have a moment? She paused as if expecting an invisible reply. I think there have been misunderstandings. We all love you. We want to move forward peacefully. Peacefully. Again that word. Always offered after an act of violence. She called a fifth time, no voicemail this time, just silence on her end, waiting for me to pick up, waiting for control to be restored. I placed the phone face down. An hour passed. Then Aiden messaged me. She is spiraling. She keeps asking me what you said to me. I am not telling her anything. She is getting suspicious. She keeps saying she knows you are planning something. I smiled faintly at the wording. She knows you are planning something. People like her do not fear damage. They fear unpredictability. They fear not knowing who holds the next move. I wrote back a single line. Do not defend me. Do not mention me. Do not soothe her. Let her hear her own thoughts. He replied almost instantly. She will go to Dad. He will push for confrontation. Let him. There was a pause. Then he wrote, Are you sure you are safe? I stared at the question for a while. Safe. Safety was no longer my goal. Safety was what they offered when they wanted me quiet, I answered. I am beyond safety now. I am in clarity. He did not respond. He understood. By afternoon, the sixth call came. This time from an unknown number. I knew it was her. I let it ring. Immediately another voicemail. Her voice was different now. No longer smooth. Brittle, I do not appreciate being ignored. I am trying to find common ground here. If you refuse to speak to me, I will assume you are choosing hostility. That is not what family does. There it was, not peace, threat, thinly veiled. I listened to the message twice, not for words, for tone. She was not angry, she was rattled. She was pacing somewhere, moving her hands as she spoke, glancing around like someone who feels watched. Good, let her feel watched. I made lunch while listening to rain beginning to patter against the windows. The house felt fuller somehow. Not with people, with consequence. Later that evening, Aiden called, not texted. Called, I answered. His voice was hushed. He was speaking from somewhere private. She went to Dad. They are arguing. She is saying you are manipulating me. He is saying you are threatening them. He says you have something planned. I did not move from my chair. Do you believe that? Number does he? I think he believes something is coming and he does not know what it is. Then let him sit with that. There was silence on the line. Then Aiden whispered, I have never seen her like this. She is shaking. She keeps asking me what you told me. She keeps saying I am hiding things from her. You are, I know, it feels strange, but I do not feel guilty. Good. Guilt is only for wrongdoing. This is positioning. Another silence. Then, what should I do? Observe. Do not protect her from the truth she created. He breathed out slowly. I am trying to understand how you are so calm. I closed my eyes. Because for the first time in my life, I am not convincing anyone of anything. I am not proving my worth. I am simply existing and they are reacting to it. That is power. He did not speak for a while, the sound of someone realizing that power is not noise but stillness. Finally he said, I am with you, then stay with me quietly. I will. We ended the call. I set the phone down and sat in the dim light, listening to the rain grow heavier. Everyone believes war begins with action. They are wrong. War begins when silence switches sides. I woke the next morning before the sky had fully committed to daylight. Pale blue seeped slowly into the horizon like ink spreading through water. I remained in bed for a while, eyes open, watching the faint shift of brightness against the ceiling. There was no urgency in my body, no restlessness, only awareness. Today felt like the kind of day that would not be loud, but would be remembered. I rose, dressed simply, and brewed tea. As the steam curled against the window, I thought about how strange it must feel for them now. They were likely pacing through rooms whispering theories between themselves, trying to guess what I would do, what I might say, whom I might call. They still believed this was a mystery that could be solved by prediction. They had not yet realized that you cannot predict someone who is no longer reacting. You can only witness them. Around 8, I unlocked the drawer in my study, the one no one knew about, not because it was hidden, because no one had ever been curious enough to look. Inside was a set of documents, neatly bound in black folders, not dusty, not forgotten, maintained, current. These were not records of the past. They were contingencies. I laid them out on the desk carefully. One folder for financial structure, one for legal safeguards, one for communication strategy, one for media instruction. I had assembled them years ago, not because I expected betrayal, but because I understood patterns. People often act according to convenience, and convenience rarely protects the one who has given the most. I opened the financial folder first. A network of accounts and properties shielded through layered ownership. Not hidden, hardened, every transfer logged, every clause explicit, every fallback plan already notarized. This was not wealth, this was armor. Next, the legal folder. A statement drafted years ago but updated quarterly. Not for court, for publication. A declaration of position, not accusatory, factual, time-stamped, signed, ready. It was not written in bitterness. It was written in precision. Finally, I opened the communication strategy. Emails drafted but unsent. Letters addressed but sealed. One to Aiden, one to Logan, one to Victoria, not emotional, not pleading, not rhetorical, declarative, structured. Irrefutable. 3 versions of truth prepared for 3 different reactions. Not because I wanted to release them, because I wanted the choice. I sat down and ran my fingers along the edges of the folders. Soft, worn, familiar. There is a misconception that preparation is paranoia. It is not. Preparation is respect for probability, and probability always arrives eventually. My phone buzzed on the desk. A new message from an unknown number. No greeting, no introduction. Just one sentence, "I know what you are doing." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I read it again, not for content but for cadence. It was not written by Logan. He used punctuation when anxious. Not by Aiden. He would have called, not messaged, which left one person. I typed a single reply, "Do you?" There was no response. I set the phone aside and closed the folders gently, stacking them with careful precision. I did not hide them away again. I left them in plain sight on the desk. They did not need to be concealed anymore. Their power was not in their secrecy. It was in the fact that they existed. I stood and looked out the window. The sky had shifted from blue to silver. A bird landed on the fence, then flew away without hesitation. Nature never asks permission to move. I whispered to myself, not as motivation, but as acknowledgement. This did not begin when they erased me. This began when I decided I could be forgotten and remain unbroken. Now they were beginning to understand. I was not reacting, I was revealing. By the 3rd day, their silence had transformed from strategy into panic. I could feel it even without hearing a word from them. Some people think control is shown through decisions, but true control is measured by how long someone can sit in uncertainty without lashing out. Victoria could not. At 11 in the morning, she appeared at my gate. She did not call beforehand. She did not text. She simply arrived, dressed immaculately in tailored cream trousers and a silk blouse, as if presentation could serve as authority. Except her hair, though neatly styled, had one loose strand that had escaped behind her ear. She kept tucking it back compulsively. Small details betray internal collapse. She did not wait for an invitation. She opened the gate and walked up the path with quick steps, not graceful ones. She rang the bell once, then twice, then a 3rd time before I even reached the door. Impatience dressed as urgency. I opened the door and stood in the frame. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes flicked across my face like she was searching for a crack. She found none. That unsettled her more than anything I could have said. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm in the way a wire is held tight right before snapping. "We need to talk." I held her gaze. "Do we?" She stiffened. "Yes, this has gone far enough." I tilted my head slightly. "What has?" She took a breath. The silent treatment. The manipulation, turning Aiden against us. Making Logan lose sleep. "You are tearing this family apart." I almost laughed, not out of humor, out of recognition. When a manipulator loses control, the first accusation they make is that you are manipulating them. Instead, I answered softly, "I have spoken to no one but my own reflection." She stepped forward slightly. Her eyes narrowed. "Do not play games with me." I remained perfectly still. "I am not playing, I am watching." She clenched her jaw. "Watching what?" "How truth behaves when it is no longer buried." She exhaled sharply through her nose. Enough with the cryptic nonsense. If you have something to say, say it, I nodded slowly. Very well, I stepped aside. Come in. Her eyes widened slightly. She had not expected me to grant entry. Permission unsettled her more than denial. She hesitated, then walked past me into the house. Her heels clicked sharply against the wood floor. A measured rhythm, pretending composure. I led her through the hallway toward the study. She glanced around, perhaps looking for signs of chaos, instability, anything she could name later as evidence of irrationality. She found none. Order was my rebellion. We entered the study. I gestured toward the desk where the black folders lay neatly. She saw them and froze. Her voice dropped. What are those? Records. Her posture straightened. Records of what? Of everything that has happened. And everything that will. She stared at the folders as if they were explosives. She did not step closer. She did not reach out. She only swallowed. Then her eyes snapped to mine. You are threatening us, I answered calmly. I am documenting you. She shook her head. No, this is extortion. It is transparency. She took a step forward, but her voice wavered for the first time. Why? Why are you doing this? All we wanted was peace. Peace without respect is sedation. She blinked slowly. Confusion and realization crossed her expression in the same breath. Then she whispered, you planned this. Not accusation, recognition. For the first time, she understood. This was not an emotional reaction. This was a process. I did not answer her. I did not need to. Silence sat between us like a verdict. She stood there staring at me for several long seconds. Her chest rose and fell, slower now. Something in her had shifted from indignation to calculation. She realized this could no longer be tamed with tone. Finally, she spoke, quietly but with effort. What do you want? I met her gaze, not with anger, not with kindness, but with clarity. I want you to feel the weight of every choice you made when you believed I would never respond. She did not speak again. She simply turned and walked out. No slamming doors, no parting words. Empty silence trailing behind her like smoke. I did not watch from the window as she left. I did not need to. I could already feel it. Fear had found a home inside her. Not fear of me, fear of consequence, and that is far more permanent. She left without looking back. I closed the door gently, not as an act of dismissal, but as acknowledgement. Something irreversible had shifted. Not in me, in her. I did not chase after it. I did not savor it. I simply let it be. 2 days passed without a word from anyone, not from Logan, not from Victoria, not even from Aiden. Some would have called it silence. I called it fermentation. Regret does not appear instantly. It swells in private, growing heavier each hour it goes unspoken. The rain had stopped by evening. The world outside was washed clean, but the silence in my house remained deliberate, undisturbed. I sat by the window with a cup of tea growing lukewarm between my hands, watching the sky turn a soft shade of fading gold. Nothing in my posture suggested victory. Nothing in my face betrayed satisfaction. I was not triumphant, I was simply present. At 6:30 my phone rang. Aiden, I answered. His voice was low, almost hollow. She lost it. I did not ask who. He did not need to clarify. He continued. She confronted Dad, accused him of hiding things from her, said she knew he was lying. He said he was tired of protecting her from herself. They screamed at each other for almost an hour. I have never seen them look more like strangers. His words were calm, but the air beneath them trembled. She finally asked him if he still trusted her. He didn't answer. She left. She didn't even take her phone. I listened. He whispered, you didn't do anything. You didn't move a single piece, but somehow everything is moving. I closed my eyes briefly. He spoke again, softer. What now? I placed the cup down gently beside me. Now nothing. He hesitated. Nothing? Yes. Let them sit in what they built. There was a long silence on the line. Not uncomfortable, reflective. Then Aiden whispered something I did not expect. It almost feels like justice. Justice is not loud. It is not theatrical. It is not performed. It is simply the point where consequence meets origin. I did not speak. He exhaled. I am coming over tomorrow, not to talk. I just want to sit in the same room as you. I nodded even though he could not see it. Come when you are ready. We ended the call. I sat there a while longer, watching the sky fade into dusk. No one else called. No one came. And for the first time in a long time, that absence did not ache. It settled. People think justice is something you deliver. They are wrong. Justice is something you stop interrupting. When I finally stood and closed the curtains, the house did not feel lonely. It felt earned.